Hi, this is Don again. Conversations with friends about spiritual or metaphysical things. I'm calling it God stuff, and this is conversation number 4. If you're watching this and you haven't started at the beginning, please go back, start at the beginning. It'll make a lot more sense. First one was judge and jury, talking about the nature of how we look into these spiritual or metaphysical things, science lab versus philosophical skeptic versus a courtroom. Next one was running in circles about circular arguments, and we all have a tendency to fall victim to that sometimes. Conversations really help us expose those and find where we're doing that unwittingly. Last one, sunglasses and brick walls, is where we're going to pick up for this time. Sunglasses, how these kind of convictions that we have shape everything we see, shape our whole world view. This isn't just another slice of our life, social, religious, political, whatever, and you just swap out one piece for another. We're talking about a whole shift in the way you view and understand reality and your place in it. That's a big deal. That's hard for us to honestly evaluate and do. And then the brick walls, that's where we're picking up again this time. I'm again just going to blow you away with my incredible artwork. Here's us, the world, everything we experience, everything we know about it, and we can't get to the other side to see if there is a God, what this God is like, or where this matter and energy that we call the universe came from. So as we're looking through that, I'm going to do the super quick review, but also eliminate a bunch of them. We looked at options like pantheism, that there's a whole bunch of gods over there, and the way they act is just like we act. Going to throw that one away. Deism, this one's actually still really important, but I'm still going to deal with it under theism. Deism is that there's a personal God who made everything, started everything, and then left. And theism is saying that there's a personal God who made everything, started everything, and is still here. Those two are close enough. I'm going to stick with talking about theism at this point through the rest of our discussion. On the other side of it, we have pantheism, which Richard Dawkins calls sexed up atheism, and I was saying it's the other way around, that this is, but pantheism is believing that matter and energy are God, maybe stating it as a life force in the universe or something like that. But there's nothing on the other side of the wall. Maybe we don't understand it all, but everything that we see in the world is eternal and is the ultimate cause that caused all of the effects that become cause and effect that we've seen from there on. Atheism is that same kind of view, except limiting it to matter and energy, while still a lot of atheist thinkers will think of awe and wonder and delight as part of our encounter with that universe. But ultimately, there is nothing more than matter, energy, and randomness at the heart of everything that we see, and that can be referred to as God if you would like to, but you don't have to, is kind of a lot of the atheist views as I've read them and understand them. This is the other one we're going to deal with a lot. And what I told you is that I probably would be an agnostic. I would argue that you just can't get to the other side and see what's over there and figure it out for yourself. So let me back off for a second and give you some varieties of those views that I respect and some that I don't at all. First off, you have kind of what I would call flaky or fluffy or wishy-washy views on both. Can't respect that. Think of a theistic view and somebody that says, yeah, I believe in God. My grandma believes in God. Why wouldn't I believe in God? And that's about the extent of it, right? There's no real conviction there. There's no real thought. Same thing for atheists who might say something to the effect of, I don't want there to be a God. I want to drink and party, and I don't want God to get mad at me, so if I don't believe in him, then he won't believe in me. And that's about the extent of theirs. Hard to respect that either, right? Both of those are the flaky, wishy-washy, get rid of them, don't respect them. There's kind of a middle position to both that I really respect. I've looked at it. I've examined it. I've tried to figure it out the best that I can, and this is what I am convinced of or persuaded of, and that's where I stand. I can respect that in both positions, theism and atheism. Doesn't mean I think they're both equally right. I'm a theist. I've been persuaded by this one, not this one. But I still have respect for people who hold both of those views with conviction, with persuasion, but also with an ounce of humility, which brings us to the third position, which I call a hard atheist or a hard theist, somebody who's dogmatic and severe. So we'll go with atheism first. Not only do I not believe there's a God, I know there is not a God. And you're a moron if you believe there is a God. Well, I'm not buying it. By definition, if there's a God over here and he wants to hide himself so that you can't see him or find him, and he wants to even leave false clues that tell you he's not there, by definition, any God that exists is perfectly able to do that. And we are absolutely not able to definitively, dogmatically say, I know and can prove there is no God. And even the most hardcore atheists that I know don't take that stance. I should say the authors and lecturers and things like that are hardcore atheists. On the street, at the bar stool, wherever you're meeting somebody, you meet some hardcore people, right? And they believe they can definitively prove that there is no God. Well, they're wrong. But equally wrong are the theists, whether Jewish, Muslim, Christian, whatever, who say, I can absolutely prove there is a God. Not really. If you can, I wish you would have already, because it would make the world a simpler place if everybody believed the same thing. You can't definitively prove there's a God there because there's this barrier in between, and we can't figure him out with thought exercises and lock him down with logic, and we can't pin him down and put him on a science lab table and dissect him and do repeated experiments. End of the day, to a hard position, I'm going to come up as an agnostic. And this is where I naturally would fall, I think, just given on my own, is that I can't figure out what's on the other side. I think I'd be a, convinced, persuaded agnostic. I don't know what's on the other side. I might be a hard agnostic. It's impossible to know what's on the other side. I don't know, and you can't know either, which would make me a jerk. So I'm glad I'm not that. But here's the paradigm shift. That's the name of today's conversation, is paradigm shift. All of this that I've been talking about so far starts with us. Kind of feels like that's the only place we can start, right? And that's the place that we want to start. But what happens if we look at it and we say, I can't figure out what's on the other side of that great barrier. I can't get past matter and energy. I can't get past the universe that we live in. It's like a fishbowl made of mirrors, and all I can see is I'm in the fishbowl, but I can't see outside of it and see what's on the other side. I just think there is something, because fishbowls don't just happen, and that's about all I got. Well, I might not be able to see past that wall, but what if God wanted to reveal himself, herself, itself? I'm going to say him a lot. That fits my convictions, and it gets laborious to constantly say him, her, or it. But if God wants to reveal himself, by definition, God can. God is able. If God made the universe that we live in, all of the matter and energy, and us for that matter, and created everything, sustains everything, holds it together. If God wants to reveal himself, by definition, he can. The question then becomes, what would that look like? I want to tell you what I'm persuaded of, why I'm a follower of Christ. And then the next two conversations that I do, I'm going to try to give you the big story that persuades me, and I'm going to try to give you the crucial moment that persuades me. But it's going to kind of go into more narrative mode, as well as inviting you to look at different perspectives and evidence as we go through that narrative mode a little bit. But before we get to that, let me just ask you to do that thought exercise on your own. If there is a God, and this God wants to reveal himself to the world, to people that he's created, or anything else in this whole thing we call the universe, his fishbowl, what would that look like? What would this God choose to reveal? Why would this God choose to reveal? How would this God choose to reveal? When I have this conversation with people, most of the time, they just think, well, if there's a God and this God wants to reveal himself, he's just going to light up the sky and leave no doubt and just be like, here I am. And you have no choice but to acknowledge, and you just are forced to acknowledge that this God exists. Really? You think that's what that God would do? Maybe. But think about it from a different perspective. Think about a marriage relationship. And if one spouse beats the other spouse and physically dominates and pummels the other spouse until that spouse confesses, I love you with all my heart, how loving does that feel, right? If you're the powerful spouse and you beat the weaker spouse to that point, is that really what you're looking for? Is that really love? Isn't it a lot more rewarding when you're in a relationship where one spouse gives love to the other freely and out of choice and out of desire? Isn't that a lot more rewarding? Just an example to think about. Or if this God created everything and wanted to just hide and leave clues that would mislead and all of that, well, that's certainly possible. It would make you wonder why a God who wants to hide would bother to make everything in the first place. They didn't need to do that. That's a possibility. Would this God leave clues about himself or hints about himself? And if so, what would they be like? Would this God send a message, or would this God send a messenger? And if so, what would that message be? What would the messenger look like? I have one hypothesis that I'll just encourage you to think about. If there's a God, and they make this whole fishbowl we call the universe, all matter and energy that we can see, my hunch is that whatever reason this God made our fishbowl for is going to inform if and how this God reveals himself to those of us who live in the fishbowl. Does that make sense? And if not, if there is no God, wouldn't we expect just total silence? Well, that's it for today. Let me seriously encourage you to, before I start talking about what I think and why, to just let yourself dream a little bit and think about, if there's a God, if this God made everything, why? Why make it? And if so, how does that inform if or how or when or to what extent this God would choose to reveal himself to those of us living in the fishbowl? Hey, I hope you're healthy. I hope you're well. I love you, friends. I'll talk to you soon.